If you haven't met me yet, I'm your MC for the conference. My name is Jason Harris. I'm an evangelist here at Fivetran. I'm super excited to welcome our next speaker. His name is Clayton Hicklin. He's the Director of Technology at Emery, Sapp & Sons, which is a construction firm. And this session is sponsored by Looker. So thanks to Looker for enabling this session. Clayton, it's all you. Still waiting on your video.
Yeah. Says the host has stopped it, so I cannot start my video.
Hey, production team, can you give us a hand, please? Curious to know while we wait, put in the chat, where are you coming from? And also what are your roles? Curious to know if we have analysts, engineers, business side. Where are y'all from and what do y'all do? We got John coming in from Baltimore. He's a data architect. Derek is in Utah, a data engineer checking in. Awesome. Andreev, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And you're a data scientist from Austin. That's cool. Okay, looks like we are ready to go. Clayton, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks guys. Thank you, Jason and team, for having me here today. I appreciate it, and appreciate the opportunity to be able to kind of share our story and how we arrived at constructing and building a modern data stack and a modern data analytics platform. So as Jason mentioned, I'm Clayton Hicklin, Director of Technology at Emery, Sapp & Sons, and let's see, I've got control here now. So we will get started here. So we are going to cover several things here today. Next slide here, there we go. So, so our agenda here today is to first tell you a little bit about who we are. We are a heavy civil construction company in the Midwest, and I think typically when you're learning about and attending conferences like these, dealing with modern technologies and modern analytics platforms, it's not typical to think about traditional industries such as construction or manufacturing. You get a lot of tech companies and healthcare and finance and things like that. But I want to talk a little bit about who we are as a construction company and why analytics are important to us and why it is just as meaningful to us as it would be for what you might think of as a more technical industry. And then I want to walk through a little bit of our journey in terms of reaching our modern data stack. So how we arrived at where we are today, kind of where we started, what our goals were throughout that process, and how we ultimately landed on the stack that we have today, and then talk a little bit about what the result of that evaluation and implementation was, and our next steps to get value out of what we have today, and also as our business change and our data needs change. So moving on here, so who are we? So Emery, Sapp & Sons Construction, we're a heavy civil construction firm. We've been around since 1972. We are 100% employee owned, and over really the first, I would say 30 plus, maybe 35 years of the existence of our organization, we really grew organically in kind of a traditional way in the local area that we were founded, as well as starting to sort of spread out regionally from there. But over the last few years, we've had some really stair-step kind of growth on top of that organic growth, which we'll address here later, and some of our challenges that has really accelerated our need for advancing our technology platform and making better use of data. If you're not familiar with the heavy civil construction industry, we really focus on roads, bridges, commercial site prep, some underground work with piping utilities, and then paving with asphalt and concrete. So, we kind of refer to it a lot of times as a horizontal construction. We don't really build up from there. We do a ton of public work, so a lot of highway and other public projects like that. We've got around 400 plus active projects spread across 10 states, so we're pretty spread out now. We travel a lot for our work, as well as geographically opening new sites and brick and mortar office sites in multiple states now. around 1,400 employees. That has basically doubled in the last year and a half. So we've got a challenge there with our workforce and the data associated with them. We have multiple subsidiaries now. So last year, a lot of our growth was due to acquisition. And because of that, we now have multiple subsidiaries that are in different geographies with different employee populations and different business systems associated with those that are generating data. And we're looking at hopefully doing around 600 million in projected revenue this year. And that's not quite, but pretty close to double where we were at 2 years ago whenever I joined the organization. So we'll see growth as a theme throughout here. Growth is great. It's a good challenge to have, but it's definitely a challenge. And one of the reasons we've kind of gone down this path of kind of reinventing our analytics environment. So. Okay, so why are analytics important to us? A lot of these will be pretty familiar reasoning, but I wanted to touch on a few things that are very specific to the construction industry. So number one, the construction industry operates on very thin margins. So for those of us that are familiar or used to working in the technology industry, it would be probably eye-opening to learn how thin those margins are. Typically, we're operating on a somewhere around a 5 to 10% gross margin on the work that we do. So because of that, then we are very cost sensitive. So the work we do is very cost driven. We track that closely, whether that be labor or equipment costs or materials, but we are extremely cost sensitive and cost conscious in the work that we do because of those thin margins. Likewise, it is very competitive. So because it is a tight margin and there are a lot of competitors in our space of all different sizes and capabilities, it is an extremely competitive landscape. Because of that, we're always looking for ways to try and be more competitive, find an edge or a way to set us apart from our competition. This industry is a heavily labor-based workforce, so labor is our biggest asset, our people that are out in the field doing the work, but it also presents its own challenges because people are not widgets, people are not technology, so we have to manage that workforce, find good people, retain them, make sure that they're getting the skills and things that we need and be able to do that at scale as we grow. Because we are very people-focused and labor-based, compliance and safety is a huge concern. So we don't have regulations like healthcare necessarily or finance, but we do have compliance concerns around safety and OSHA and training and education and certifications for our folks. And a couple other things in our industry, there's increasingly every day and every year more data being generated out in the field. So this is not all just back office data related to finance or HR. There's a lot of data, telematics and other things coming in from the field that increasingly we want to make better use of. And then also, as I mentioned before, so our growth, our sheer growth in the last couple of years and expected in the next couple of years is really driving a lot of our need for better utilizing data and turning our planning and decision making into more of a science than an art. So we think analytics can help us do that. And I put a quote over on the right there just to give an idea, just industry-wide, how important managing costs are and where that savings can be found as we move forward and grow and start to compete on a larger stage. So I'm trying to walk you through kind of where we were at, our evaluation process, and then where we have landed today. So we had a pretty traditional data warehouse environment, most of you probably be familiar with. So SQL Server-based architecture, SSIS as our ETL tooling and automation, and Power BI dashboards. This was really implemented by a third-party consultant in our region probably 4 or 5 years ago, prior to me joining the organization, and they did a good job with it as a kind of traditional data warehouse design, straight out of the Kimball text, and was well built, from the get-go. But the challenge with having kind of a third party come and implement an environment like that is that on day one, things might be pristine and working well, but if you don't have kind of the expertise and the ownership and the continual investment in that platform, it has a tendency to stagnate. So there's really just a handful of dashboards and just a couple of different data sources that were originally implemented in that environment. And it hadn't really grown a lot beyond that, aside from a few, just ad hoc kind of reporting initiatives out of there. The other challenge with that is that was all on-prem infrastructure that had to be maintained. And I'll probably mention several times throughout the discussion here that we're a construction company, not an IT company. And while I have a good team of folks that handle our technology and support and implementation and maintenance, we're a small team, and we don't expect to grow, at least not linearly with the way that the organization is growing. And so wherever we can find opportunities to be more efficient and scale, that's important to us. So, and we'll touch on that as we look at some of the modern data stack components that we evaluated. But the main thing was, we had an opportunity and a desire as an organization to reinvest in our analytics capabilities. So we needed to give our existing environment kind of a fair assessment of what was there and whether or not it would meet our needs, and understand what we had under the roof already prior to moving on to assessing future options. So, as we looked at that and decided that, yes, we want to kind of reinvest in this space, and one of the first things we needed to do was to establish what it is we're trying to accomplish. What are our goals here, with kind of refocusing on data and analytics. So some of those goals were really, one, we wanted to make sure that whatever we built was, web native or mobile first and mobile friendly, so that at the end of the day, the visualizations that we produce would be easily used by our end users who are increasingly mobile, especially in our field. I spend a lot of time outside the office, at the project site, or on the road traveling, and so we want to make sure that there's a user-friendly aspect to it. We want to make sure that the architecture was agile. So as we have new data sources come online, or if we have new needs as an organization, potentially acquiring other companies, are we able to fold those into the existing environment in an agile way, in a flexible way, and get those new data sources as part of the overall stack easily. We want to be pretty, so I kind of put that on there a little bit tongue in cheek, but what it really means is that the user experience, whether that be the end user with visualizations, or whether it be our analysts or designers that are using the underlying tools and the platform, pretty is kind of a proxy for user experience, and what that really means is it needs to be intuitive, it needs to be very easy to use, very interactive. It needs to make sense. And again, we don't expect to hire a team of data scientists and architects. We are looking for tools and a user experience that we can get business value out of quickly and easily without a ton of training. We want a self-service environment, so I really want to get to the point where it's not, my business analysts building everything for everyone else. We want to turn these tools over to our department leads and other folks that need to pull data out of the data warehouse, and be confident that we can give it to them and allow them to answer their own questions without necessarily routing everything through our team. And related to that, we want to make sure the quality of the data in there is good. So some of that is on the front end of capturing and inputting the data. But a lot of that is we need to make sure that we kind of model out and present sanitized data to our end users, so that there's no question that they're getting the same answers and getting quality answers from their queries. More at the architectural level, I want to make sure we had a separation of concerns. So I didn't necessarily want to buy an all-in-one package of data warehouse plus pipelines plus visualization all on one vendor, on one platform, in one package. I want to make sure we had the flexibility to mix and match those pieces, as well as bring in other technologies in that stack whenever we need to address our needs. And probably the main thing is that we really want to make sure we had ownership over all of the pieces of this within the organization, so that it wasn't just somebody's part-time job or an and that they spent a little bit of time on each week. We wanted to make sure that we had somebody that owned this and was kind of the champion of this stack. And to that end, we've since hired a business analyst who's going to be owning all of this, both on the technical side as well as the business side, in terms of working with the different departments to get them what they need. So with that being said, the other kind of piece of the puzzle is understanding what data sources we had to bring into the system. So I've got the product names on here for anybody that's interested, but at a kind of generic level, things that we are interested in and that we have pulled into our data warehouse and that we plan to use things like time card data, so labor and equipment hours from the field, as well as units of production, so yards of concrete or tons of gravel or what have you. All of those things are being tracked out in the field and pulled back into our job costing system and analyzed in our data warehouse. Equipment maintenance, so time and labor and materials and parts and things that are spent maintaining our equipment, which is a huge part of our cost structure. Just general financial and job costing data, so all the other AR and AP and cash management and GL and everything else that goes into our accounting system, as well as any job cost related data is extremely important to us. Opportunity tracking, so trying to construct a better view of our pipeline and opportunities and backlog, as far out in the future as we can, using things like Salesforce. Human resource data. So again, our labor pool or our labor workforce is our most valuable asset, and so understanding, where to find the best labor and how to retain them and how to train them up and keep them safe is really important to us. So safety incidents is part of that. That's some data that comes in also from the field as we report those incidents back. Fuel expenditure is a huge expenditure for us related to our equipment, so that's something we track very closely. And then just kind of an additional, outside of the normal operations of the business, we track from my team's perspective our help desk efforts, so tickets and topics and categories and resolutions, and try to use that data to help fine tune our end user support efforts there. So those are some of our goals and data sources that we want to pull in. Of course, there will be more and changing ones in the future, but with those goals in mind, we evaluated, and on the last slide here I didn't touch on, but evaluated several different offerings in the industry. You guys will probably recognize a lot of the names on here, both in the pipeline, the data warehouse space, and the visualization space, and really broke it up into those three layers and tried to figure out who the best candidates in that space, each of those spaces are, and evaluate those. And ultimately, what we came up with is our, what we would consider our modern data stack warehouse architecture. So walking through this from left to right, I'll kind of give you an idea of the flow of our data and where each of these pieces fits in, but I think this will map pretty well to the concept of a modern data stack and hopefully show that we have the flexibility and the agility to manage not just the data that we have today, but any of our needs in the future. So on the left-hand side, we have a combination of on-prem data sources. This doesn't represent them all, but just kind of a sampling of the different data sources we might have in play here. So we have a number of SQL Server-based transactional systems. We've got a Postgres staging database where we collect a lot of data that's replicated from several different on-prem systems, as well as some custom tables that we use for various processes further down the line. We have data like Salesforce or the aforementioned Bamboo HR that's coming from cloud data sources. We have our Zendesk data, also cloud data source. So we've got a combination of quite a few different things. And really the challenge was to try and figure out how to get all that to our data warehouse, which we landed on as BigQuery, but how to get that data there effectively, efficiently, reliably, and with little to no effort on our team's part. And the evolution there really was that we started out with a lot of custom scripting and automation done kind of at the system level, and while that worked okay initially and for a small number of data sources, there's just a lot of day-to-day maintenance that is included with that. And again, that's not something I necessarily want my team spending their time on. And so as we kind of expanded out the number of data sources and the complexity of the data that we wanted in our warehouse, it quickly became obvious that we needed some kind of a turnkey tool to take that heavy lifting off of our team's plate so we could focus on other things. And Mentioned several pipeline tools on the previous slide, but after evaluation, Fivetran was the one that came to the forefront as the most obvious winner for a variety of reasons, but mostly it just works. And most of the other platforms that we evaluated and tested out for varying reasons, either were too complex, required a little more maintenance, or were just not working well in our environment. And Fivetran really checked all the boxes for us, was able to get up and running quickly, moving from a trial environment into production extremely easily. And it's been pretty much hands off, turnkey, no maintenance, no headache, no worry about it at all since then. And we're, I think, going into our third or fourth month on the platform at this point. So Fivetran's role here is basically to get any and all data sources that we might be interested in dumped into our data warehouse. Again, that's Google BigQuery. We are a G Suite shop and have a couple other Google products, and so that fit really well into our environment. It's massively scalable. We're not even coming close to touching the capabilities of the platform, but our identity and access management and security and everything was already integrated in, and so it was just kind of an obvious choice, easy to get up and running, and it was a great platform for ingesting all kinds of different types of data. You'll see I referenced DBT there. So again, earlier I kind of mentioned our traditional data warehouse schema in our legacy on-prem data warehouse. We are really taking more of an ELT kind of approach here of get all of our data into one place and then visualize that in various ways depending on our end users' needs. So today, rather than spinning off or creating a bunch of concrete data marts, we're really just using DBT to create a set of layered views for different use cases that kind of function like data marts, but we don't ever really manipulate the data. We just provide sanitized views of that data for various tools. And so far that's worked well for us. That may need to evolve more in the future, but from a performance and flexibility standpoint, that's been a really great solution for us. And then ultimately, we consume the data out of that warehouse kind of in three different ways. The main way that we want to utilize that data is using Looker. So if we go back to our desire to have ease of self-service and data quality, Looker really provides the best of both worlds in terms of giving our end users easy to use tools, but then giving our analysts and more technical folks the ability to model that data and make sure that we have consistent views of that data for our end users to pull from. We also do a number of kind of one-off or ad hoc analytics or even kind of some simple business process solutions in Google Sheets with the recent announcement of their enhanced functionality around connected sheets and BigQuery. That's become a really powerful tool for us to do some quick business processes and analysis on large amounts of data, and easy enough to put in our non-technical end users' hands in many cases. And then we do still have a set, some custom scripts that are pulling data of our warehouse to do some data automation and notification and things like that. But one of our efforts here really is to migrate most of that custom scripting into either Sheets or ultimately into Looker, and hopefully get away from having any real code running at all that we have to maintain. So moving on, so what is the result of all this? So minimal maintenance. So in that data stack that we looked at, there is really no infrastructure there. Once you get past the source data systems, there's really no infrastructure there that my folks have to maintain. We monitor the execution of all of that data movement, but there is not hardware, storage, security, things like that require our day-to-day attention. So that has been a huge help, and will avoid a lot of that in the future. That's kind of resulted in lower headcount, not that we got rid of anybody, but that we didn't necessarily need to hire any dedicated resources to maintain that infrastructure. And so they can go focus on other things like worrying about the business problems that we're trying to solve, or maintaining other aspects of our environment. Much lower learning curve. So as I mentioned, we just brought a business analyst on, and we're expecting him to be able to get up to speed and start to be productive and produce valuable analytics out of this platform quickly. If we were starting down at kind of a more closer to the metal level with a lot of custom programming and things like that, the learning curve would be much longer and much steeper. So we really think there's a huge value there. And that'll allow him really to focus on the data and the business problems that we're trying to solve and not focus on infrastructure. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do is connect, the business to this. So what are the problems that we're trying to solve on the business side? How can we use our data that we have most easily to help go solve those problems and not spend a ton of time maintaining that environment? So that's where we're at today, and kind of where we're going from here. So I mentioned before ownerships. We do now have a business analyst that owns this space. He will also play a large part in data governance and getting our different departments to buy in and start using this data themselves. Would love to get into the realm of machine learning, predictive analytics. Can we predict when a machine might fail? Can we predict when there might be an accident at a work site? Can we predict, when we might have turnover in our employee population, those types of things, and be smarter about how we manage our business. Obviously, we're going to bring in additional data sources as we continue to grow. Would really like to start to investigate, more traditional, what I would call big data sets and things that may be coming in from the field, like telematics data and other data points that might be in the millions, if not billions of rows instead of thousands of rows of data. And we really think the environment that we build is flexible enough to handle all of those use cases in the future, between Fivetran getting the data there, BigQuery being able to store just about anything, and Looker and Sheets giving us the ability to consume that data easily. I think we're in a pretty good position to be very flexible going forward. And I've talked a lot. I think we were to the Q&A session, so I think I will hand it over to Jason.
This is fantastic, Clayton. Super hands-on and a really good big picture of your environment. We've had some questions come in, and how was it for your team getting up to speed on LookML?
That's an ongoing process. So I kind of started that process and the evaluation myself, and our business analyst that we hired now is starting that journey. So LookML, if you're familiar with markup languages and JSON and kind of that environment, it's pretty easy to get up and running on it. It is an extremely powerful modeling layer. It does probably far more than we're ever going to tap into. And they're continually involving it. But it does take a little bit of a learning curve at first to understand kind of where it fits in the whole stack. But I will say that it does not take long to learn it to the point of being able to deliver value and see how that can help ensure data quality and consistency. That's one of those things behind the scenes that our end users are not going to see, but one of the main reasons that we chose that platform was because of LookML.
Okay. One last one. Is it better to dump data into the lake versus ETL it there?
So I wrestled with that same question quite a bit earlier in the year as we were kind of developing our strategy around this. I think given the tools that are available today, the biggest challenge here was getting the data from our source system to our warehouse. And the simplest way to do that is to do kind of the bulk raw data dump and then deal with it after the fact, rather than trying to in-flight massage that data into the format and do all the validation and everything that you need. All of that can occur after the fact. And then we've also got all of our source data in its raw form in our warehouse to reference if we ever need to go back, and we don't actually have to go back to the source system for that. So that has been the most flexible for us. I don't know if it's the right solution for everybody, but storage is cheap. The tools are easy to use. Fivetran makes it easy to punch a button and say, put all my data from here to there. So take that part of it out so there's no headache, and then worry about the views of that data later.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a couple more questions, but I don't think we have time. So we'll do a wrap-up blog post together. I'll interface with you over email and we can get those questions answered. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Really appreciate it. At this point, we have a 10-minute break. So go ahead and interact with some of the sponsor pages. Clayton's been highlighting, some tools, and some of our other speakers have as well. So go interact with the sponsors, download some files, and earn some points. Up next, we have Kate from Story by Data, who is going to be discussing data visualization best practices. Thanks, and see you after the break.
Data. It's everywhere. With every click, swipe, view, purchase, and shipment, your business creates data. And all that data can help you run your business better. But how do you analyze it? Some solutions are too complex. Only the data team has access, which forces everyone to wait for answers. And wait, and sometimes they give up and stop asking. Other solutions let everyone do their own analysis, but only with parts of the data, so no one has the big picture. How can you give everyone in your company a consistent and reliable picture of what's happening in your business? You turn to Looker, a data platform that's speedy to deploy and can work on top of any analytic database. Looker makes it simple to describe your data and define business metrics that the entire company can agree and rely on. Once you have a reliable source of truth for your business data, anyone on your team can analyze and explore it, ask and answer their own questions, create visualizations, and drill down to row-level detail. Then everyone can share discoveries with a simple link, and every answer becomes the inspiration to explore more. Looker, a data platform that both data analysts and business teams can rely on.